Hello, my name is Laura McAlpine. I was the Labour parliamentary candidate for my hometown, Harlow, and I'm really, really pleased to be doing this interview for the Labour Outlook website. I am a proud socialist and campaigner for a better society, including working locally with the Harlow Coronavirus People Before Profits Action Group and also defend council housing. Labour Outlook is a daily source of news and views from the Labour's left, and we are delighted to have this very special interview today with Jeremy Corbyn. So hi Jeremy.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. It's really great that you're on with us today, so thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and I'm only sorry I'm not talking to you as the MP for Harlow.
I know.
Fantastic campaign, and it was a real pleasure to campaign alongside you so many times in Harlow.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you. Much appreciated. Next time, hey?
Sure, no problem.
So, right, we'll start with a few questions. So the first question, Jeremy. The Tories have really exposed that they only stand up for the very richest in recent weeks, not just in recent weeks, but with Jacob Rees-Mogg's remarks on striking workers and an end to a lot of the assistance people in the economy have had, which is going to be taken away. So what do you think are the main lessons of how the crisis has been handled and how we move forward? And what are the key issues that you are really campaigning for at the moment?
Well, the government has been found wanting from the very beginning. First of all, they were almost in denial about the corona crisis, and then reluctantly accepted there was a problem, failed to appreciate that with 94% bed occupancy, the National Health Service was always going to have trouble coping with it. And then when the World Health Organization said, test, 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 they didn't respond, and PPE was in short supply, and so we lurched from crisis to crisis in the handling of it. We were only saved from something much worse by the superhuman efforts of people in the National Health Service and the Care Service, and the huge numbers of volunteers around the country who stepped up to ensure that food was delivered and all the other essentials of life and the essentials of community were there. The government were pushed into a furlough scheme, largely by the work of John McDonnell and the Treasury team at that time, pushing them very hard alongside the TUC and all the unions. So the government then agreed the furlough scheme. The furlough scheme is now likely to come to an end, and with it, a loss of income for a very large number of people, lots of permanent job loss as a result of it, and even now, local government doesn't know what its income level is going to be when 80% of local government income comes from central government. So we're looking at an autumn of enormous stress and chaos for many people. And the government really needs to recognize that having put money into local government and to industry in order to keep jobs going, it's got to continue doing that as the economy begins to rebuild. If it doesn't, we'll see the loss of large numbers of manufacturing and other jobs and see a return to the recessions of the 1980s, which Margaret Thatcher provoked, in fact, in order to teach the working class a lesson. And so I think the important thing is to get behind the union demands that are now being made for a continuation extension of the furlough scheme and investment in our economy and Green New Deal for the future. This can be a great chance. I think the political lessons are that for all that was said about me individually, about our campaign, and about what I was proposing in the general election, within a few weeks, the government was finding all the sums of money that I'd already identified as being necessary, finding them because they had to somehow or other try to make sure that services continued. And when I was condemned for promoting the idea of free universal broadband, the very same government that condemned it was suddenly finding virtue in it and promoting it. So I think the political lesson is that the cohesive socially conscious society that we're promoting is something that vast numbers of people support and accept. But also, many who thought their lives were secure, millennials who thought they were doing well in life, suddenly discovered they weren't. They were vulnerable. They were part of a community. They were actually just as vulnerable as anybody else. And I've been working on the food banks and food hubs and things locally, and I'm a trustee of a number of local community centres, all of which have done incredible work. And talking to the volunteers that go there, they're a very interesting cross-section of the community. They will never forget that sense of solidarity that comes from working with others. And I think the political lesson of the future is communities realize they can achieve things together. And it's up to us to keep working in those communities, because defeating this government's approach to COVID is very important. The last thing I'd say on this is that it's shown the problems of underfunding of the health service, and it's shown the problems of the privatization of care. But it's also shown on a global scale that the World Health Organization demand of universal health care for all across the globe is not just important for the people that need health care that don't get it, it's also important for the health of the rest of us. And I think the approach of Trump in withdrawing from the World Health Organization is totally wrong. Our government grudgingly and rather belatedly gave some increased funding to the WHO, but I think we have to work alongside the WHO and a global response to this, because global pandemics have frightened an awful lot of people. They've taken an awful lot of lives, and they've exposed injustice and inequalities in our society.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. And the Tory attacks on the most vulnerable people, they also include refugees and migrants. So do you see that as being about divide and rule?
Very much so. Refugees are people looking for a place of safety. They're victims of environmental disaster, of human rights abuses, of war, of economic deprivation. And anyone who's been to a refugee camp, and over my life I've been to many refugee camps, they're all sad places. But they're also full of people that want to achieve something in their lives and want to contribute to the lives of the rest of us. And so when the Daily Mail has screaming headlines, and the others do also, about refugees landing on the coast of Kent, they should spare a thought for a minute. Why would somebody risk everything to get into a rubber dinghy to cross the world's busiest shipping lanes to try and get to a place of safety if they weren't totally desperate? Why would they walk across the Sahara Desert to get to Libya as a way of getting to a place of safety? And these incredible, impossible journeys are made all the time around the world. Probably in 100 years' time, if it still exists, the Booker Prize for Fiction will be the diaries of refugees trying to get to a place of safety during the COVID crisis and at other times. They'll be historical heroes. I just think we need to start thinking about the humanity of it. And I am strongly supporting the Rohingya refugees. There's 1 million of them in Bangladesh. I mean, just think about that for a minute. 1 million people as refugees in one not rich country, one poor country, Bangladesh. And they are housed, sort of. They're supported, sort of. They want to go home. It's a political crisis that's driven them there. It's a war in Iraq that drove so many to refugee camps. It's the war in Afghanistan. Think of our foreign policy as well as being part of the driving force to people forced to seek asylum.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And also take a bit of inspiration on countries like Cuba. You know, look at what Cuba do around the world. I mean, absolutely incredible.
Cuba, a small, not very rich country, managed to send doctors to northern Italy to help out at the deepest time of that crisis. And I've never forgotten seeing the pictures on television of Cuban doctors arriving at the airport and being cheered by hundreds and hundreds of people saying thank you for coming to help us. And they have shown that by universal health care and exporting health care rather than armaments, you can actually achieve far more in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, separate subject, Jeremy. So we're still seeing regular attacks in the media on yourself and the left more generally. Do you think that this is because the crisis has shown how the time for the socialist ideas and policies have come?
Well, if they're attacking us, it's for a reason. And the reason is that they are afraid of our message, and they're afraid of the popularity of our message. We have relentless mainstream media attacks on us, but just bear in mind that surveys of opinion across Europe show that in Britain, we have the least trusted press of anywhere on the continent, anywhere on the whole of the continent. And the media attacks on us are absolutely huge, and they are personally unpleasant, obviously, and they're designed to distract away from the issues of poverty, injustice, of unemployment, and of the way in which young people in our society are treated. Interestingly, support for Labour and our manifesto is highest amongst people who do not read the mainstream media. It is highest amongst younger people. It is less strong amongst much older people who are, I believe, heavily influenced by those press. There are many people offering many analyses of the last 5 years, and I'm sure they're all very interesting to read. What I can say is that politics is not about the tittle-tattle, and that's what these books are full of, tittle-tattle of who said what to who on which day, who tipped a cup of coffee over a table on which day, who had an argument with who on which day. They're much more about the larger issue of how we changed the policies of the Labour Party, Green New Deal, an economic strategy about investment and equality. We stopped using the language of scroungers towards people who are legitimately seeking Department of Social Security benefits, and so Department of Work and Pensions benefits, and so on. And I'm proud of the policy changes that we made. I'm proud of the increase in membership of the party, and I'm proud of the democracy that we improved within the party. All of that can deliver a government for the people of this country, but it will only be achieved if we develop community organizing, and if the whole party's mentality is rooted in community and rooted in community strength and achievement, which is where the whole Labour movement began in the first place. That surely is the way forward. Now, communities can be lots of things. They can be your neighbours, they can be your village, they can be your town, they can be your linguistic group, your ethnic community, they can be your Facebook group, they can be your WhatsApp group. Communities exist in lots of ways, and it's our job to be part of those communities, not talking down to people, listening to and working with people to achieve a better society, which is possible.
Yeah, that kind of actually leads me on to the next question quite nicely. So locally, where I am from in Harlow, we have been doing a lot of great work within the community, so that a lot of focus on charity groups and food banks, homeless charities, that kind of thing. But there are so many people that aren't actually affected by that work. So although they admire and they have a lot of respect for the work that the Labour Party are doing locally, I feel like we really need to engage regular working class people in a different way, because that doesn't always cut through. So I really like the idea of Labour clubs. So, you know, like the old working men's drinking clubs. And I know that's not gonna reach everybody in every community, because like you say, every community is different. But I just feel like, especially in Harlow, there's a real demographic, a real age group that I feel like they would be affected really positively by that kind of community outreach, I suppose. What do you kind of feel about that?
I think you're absolutely onto something here. People increasingly communicate with each other by Zoom, by phones in various forms, by computer, by Facebook, and all the other different groups, which is fine, and it's a good way of communicating, but it's not the same as talking to people. I think there's a huge role for Labour cafes, for a place where people can come and chat to each other, enjoy each other's company, but also be a centre for supporting people who are going through difficulties, but also listening to people's ideas of what they want for the future. Now, a sort of working men's drinking club was something that was very, very important, but I do think we need to sort of move on a bit in the way in which things are done. And we've got in my constituency, or just on the borders of it, something called the Mildmay Club. It's a very old club. It was founded as a progressive working men's club in the early 20th century.
Jeremy, my granddad used to go to that. My granddad
did he really?
He did, yeah.
Right.
But
the Mildmay Club, and it's kind of come into its own now.
I know.
It's a food hub and a food bank. It's got a theatre space there. It's got lots of space there, and they've kept the books of members of the Mildmay Club who wrote home from the trenches in the First World War to the club, explaining what their life was like. And they've got a renewed membership, renewed activity. Absolutely fantastic. So it's a rebirth and regeneration of the old idea. And I didn't know your granddad, but that's fantastic.
I know, but linking in with what you said, because I know that you say with the working men's clubs, we need to kind of move on a bit, and I totally respect that. Like, I like the idea of the Labour cafes, but with the Railway Club, when we used to go, and my granddad went because he liked a cheap drink really, and he was a plasterer, so he used to catch up with friends, and they chat politics, but just about everyday life. And what they used to do for the children, the grandchildren, is they used to take collections all year round, and then at Christmas we'd all be really treated and really spoilt. So we'd go ice skating, we'd go to the pantomime, we'd all receive a stocking full of presents. And lots of the kids there, they were just regular kids, and they might have not received many presents at home at Christmas. So it was a really, really special thing. And I really liked the way that they kind of gave back to the local community. So just a small initiative, but it meant a lot. And I really remember those times, really fond memories.
Labour cafes with a license, absolutely fine by me.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a way of bringing people together. I mean, personally, I don't drink. I don't object to people drinking. That's absolutely fine. But they need to be inclusive so that everybody feels able to go there. And that's something that I would absolutely strongly support. And one of the policies that I pushed very hard in the party was an arts and culture policy. Because if you know this probably better than me, a wholly disproportionate number of leading acts in this country are the products of public schools, likewise musicians and so on. Why? Because those schools spend quite a lot of money on music education. They give their students the chances which the state schools increasingly don't, because they've cut back on art and music education. And that's why I was determined to bring in a pupil arts premium, so that there's a ring-fenced fund for music, art and cultural education for all children in all schools. And again, there's some wonderful pioneers that have done that work. And in my own community, Anna Scher, who set up theatre group in Islington, Anna Scher brought loads of kids in off the nearby estates and so on. Quite a few of them ended up on EastEnders because she gave space to people and gave imagination to them. I'm involved with a number of local theatre groups where we run as charities, so it's completely free for the students that come in, and they self-write plays and then perform them. And it's quite interesting what they write and what they perform. But it gives them that idea of self-worth. They're not spectators in society, they're participants in society.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. We have two fantastic local organisations locally in Harlow, free to attend. One is the Harlow Rock School and the other is Livewire. And again, it's children coming together from whatever background, completely free, and they devise and write their own theatre. And they've done fantastic things, meditation workshops. They're all learning a musical instrument. And again, going back to Cuba, everyone in Cuba, every child receives a music in their education, ballet lessons, whether you're male or female, and they produce the most fantastic artists in the whole world. I think it's so important. And sorry, I know this interview is not about me, so I'm going to wrap myself up. But
don't do that.
So, but also I noticed coming from just a regular background as well, and I was lucky. I received a DADA Dance and Drama award from the government, and I went to professional dance school. So I was so fortunate, enabled me to do that. It was a Labour government that did that, but I faced so much prejudice in the industry because I don't come from an upper class, and it is really an upper class background. And I've always been judged on my accent to the point where whenever I attended auditions and castings, I used to change my, they wouldn't judge me. And you know what? It always worked. Get a recall. Whenever I used my own authentic voice, I didn't seem to go much further. And I hated doing that, but it was my only way to actually ensure that I had my foot in the door. And that's why I liked your idea of democratising the BBC as well, because it is about who you know and what school you went to, rather than regular people from any background having the same opportunity as the people that are from a more privileged background.
Absolutely. Well, we need to give people the freedom to think, the freedom to paint, the freedom to write poetry, and the freedom to act. And it has a knock-on in society as a whole. La Sistema in Venezuela gave a lot of very poor kids the chance to play musical instruments. And you ask any teacher, when kids are good at music or enjoy doing music, their maths improves, their English improves, their languages improve. It's the whole thing. The human mind is a naturally creative thing. Now, I'm fascinated by poetry. I've got lots of books up here of Coleridge and lots of other people. When Coleridge was writing his poetry in the late 18th century, what he was writing about was obviously amazing stuff. One of his great friends was Humphrey Davy, who was then discovering the uses and possibility of electricity. And people didn't say, well, what's a poet doing talking to a scientist? They saw them both as exploring creative ideas. Surely we should get back to that idea. You can be creative and exploratory in lots of ways.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I really like that. So sorry, back to you properly. So, okay, a lot of socialists, they seem to be thinking about leaving the party in light of the leaks and other political developments. So what advice would you give them? And what can we do to bring people together inside the party in terms of campaigning for socialist policies?
Well, I was very proud to be elected leader of the party in 2015. And I'm not pretending it was an easy time. It wasn't. And everybody knows the stories of the opposition that was mounted towards what we, not me, what we were trying to achieve. And obviously the 2019 election result was devastating in many, many ways. But it doesn't prove we were wrong. All it proves is that we have to fight even harder to get these policies through. And the corona crisis proved the value of them. And so I'm in the party, I'm arguing for policies in the party, I'm campaigning for policies in the party, but above all, I'm campaigning with other people as well on job protection, on job extension, on environmental policies, on human rights policies and humanitarian policies. Let's make it our party, let's make it our movement, and guide it by the strength of opinion at the grassroots that wants to see that decent, fair society that I know we're all determined to achieve. And so my message is stay active in the party, but above all, undertake the campaigning that's necessary. I was talking to people in Momentum and other groups last week, and the big problems coming up are job losses. We discussed that a bit earlier in this interview, but it's also evictions in the private rented sector, because the ban on evictions is due to end anytime soon, unless the government can be forced to extend it. The rents are likely to go up as a result of it. So we're going to look at a lot of very desperate people. If the government can afford to find the money, as it could, in February and March, to house most rough sleeping homeless people, we as a society can do it all the time. And we can provide people with that security in the private rented sector and invest in council housing for the future. These are the campaigns we've got to mount. If we're to win, we win by the campaigns we do now that mobilize people to give them the self-confidence of a government that truly will invest for their future. in a world that will invest for their future. We are not alone in this. There are millions around the world that have seen something different during the corona crisis and want to see a different world as a result of it. And so I've spent a lot of my time during the last few months, obviously reading, writing, and so on, but also doing huge numbers of Zoom calls all over the world. I did a joint Zoom call between Russia, Canada, and the USA 2 weeks ago. I was doing one yesterday with Lula in Brazil. We've done them with people in Southern Africa. We've done them with people in India. And so we've suddenly realized the technology that's actually been there for quite a while is a way of bringing people together in common endeavor and common struggle. The environmental crisis is very serious, very real, very here and very now. The green industrial revolution doesn't threaten people who are victims of the environmental crisis. It gives them hope for the future.
Jeremy, you are a hugely influential figure. So what do you see your role in the movement going forward?
Being as active as I possibly can, traveling as widely as I possibly can around the country and elsewhere to support and promote a generation of people that have been inspired by the ideas that we can do things differently. I get huge amounts of correspondence, emails, letters, cards, all kinds of things. We had thousands and thousands after the election. And I obviously tried to reply to people as best we can, but we've had thousands and thousands of them. And all of them talk about what they're doing on local campaigns and how determined they are to support the strategy that we put forward. So my job is to support people in the campaigns that they do, and also to ask people to consider the reality of the powers that are raged against us all the time. So we cannot be naive about this. We were given huge attacks by very important and very powerful media figures, the Murdoch Empire in particular. And that means the importance of developing our own forms of communication directly amongst ourselves and not relying on the medium of somebody else to carry our message. And I ask those that want to write about the last 5 years, with great respect, go ahead, write whatever you wish to write. Of course, you're entitled to do that, but recognize the social imperative behind that movement, that we've created a society of sustainability, economic and environmental sustainability, that we don't pass by on the other side to the poorest people, the underachievers in school, the street sleepers, those that have obviously been fed a raw deal by society. A society is strengthened by its inclusivity. And I was very proud that we dropped the idea of social mobility in terms of, instead termed it in form of social justice. That's what we're about.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple of lighter questions to finish, Jeremy. So what political books would you suggest that we read?
Well, as you can see behind me, there's plenty of them in this room. And I
How
love
do you find
reading.
the time?
Well, I make it my business to be reading a bit every day for about half hour to an hour every night. I read something that is not necessarily to do with what I'm doing that day. And the book I'm just about to get underway reading is this one, but I'll show you this one first. I've just finished reading this, Susan Abulawa, Against the Loveless World. She's a Palestinian writer who was born in a refugee camp in 1967. And it's the story of her life in Kuwait and in Jordan and in Palestine and in prison and coming out of prison, and her reflections on it. It's pretty heavy going in places, but it's absolutely brilliant. So I got in touch with her and thanked her for the book, for writing it. And so she and I are going to take part in a public discussion about the contents of the book. She lives in the United States now. We're going to do a discussion on it. But the other book I just got is this one. It's a bit heavy going because it's a very big book. Sylvia Pankhurst, Natural Born Rebel by Rachel Holmes. Sylvia was a suffragette, was imprisoned in HMP Holloway in my constituency, along with Connie Markovits and others, who became the first woman elected to Parliament, and was a friend of Keir Hardie's, and was the socialist of the Pankhurst family. And after the end of the First World War, went to live in Ethiopia, and eventually became an Ethiopian citizen. And when she died, was buried with full national honours in Ethiopia. Her life was about fighting for the rights of women to get the vote, but also for a socialist society for the future. And she worked very closely with Keir Hardie in opposing the First World War, and supporting those who were active opponents of the war, whereas others in the suffragette movement thought that they would get a deal out of Asquith and the government at the time by supporting the war in return for getting the right to vote later on. I think Sylvia is an amazing heroine, and I'm so looking forward to reading this book and learning something from it. It's quite important to always read something that isn't necessarily directly related to the work you're doing at any one time. And as you can see, I have stacks of books all around me, and when I've finished with them, they find good homes in local charity shops.
That's brilliant. Okay, I've taken some inspiration there. I just really struggle to find the time at the moment. I have got a little boy, but it is difficult. But like you say, if you can just find half an hour every evening, then that should do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find a half-hour break somewhere just to read a bit, and it's something I've always done. And before I go on a train journey anywhere, I always take a book with me, because if you obviously you're on a train journey, you're going to go and do a meeting somewhere, so you're usually getting ready for the meeting. But it's important to also be inspired by others. So during the leadership campaign 2015, when I did 100 events all around the country, I was reading De Profundis by Oscar Wilde on the train.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. And Jeremy, what was the best piece of advice that Tony Benn gave you?
Oh, Tony Benn gave me lots of good advice. I remember one night we're leaving Parliament very late, and it'd been a very long day, and I think it was during the miners' strike, and I said, "Oh, Tony, you'll be glad to get home and get some sleep now." He said, no, old comrade, it's been an absolutely fascinating day. We've been at the picket lines this morning, we raised this in Parliament, we've done this meeting, we did an awful lot of stuff together. I said, yeah, well, that's why you deserve a rest. He says, no, it's so busy, it's going to take me at least an hour to write it up in my diary tonight. He said, a word of advice, don't make yourself a prisoner of your own diary, whatever you do. I said, why do you say that? He said, because I started writing a diary when I was 8 years old and I can't stop. And,
brilliant.
So Tony and I were sort of great friends. And the other advice he shared with me, the idea was, he phoned me up one Sunday morning and he said, I'm deciding that I'm going to step down from Parliament, and so on and so on and so on. And if the time's come, I've got to step down and do other things. And I prepared this statement, which says I'm leaving Parliament in order to spend more time on politics. And so he said, what do you think of that? So I went completely quiet. And he said, are you still there? I said, yeah, I'm still there. He said, so what do you think? I said, well, two things, Tony. One is, I think it's completely wrong that you're leaving Parliament, and I'm very sorry. But secondly, it's absolutely brilliant what you've written there. And what I admired about Tony was that he was always able to think outside the box, and also give time to people who wouldn't otherwise be heard or listened to. And that was what he did. He always maintained that ability to stay in touch with other people, because if you're in a very prominent and very active and important position in politics, you're often surrounded by lots of people who are trying to help you and support you and do things for you. And you spend your time inevitably talking to them. It's very important to make time to talk to the others. Just go out, walk around your community, chat to people in a cafe, get involved with discussion with people who you would never normally meet, who don't want anything from you, just want to share a few ideas with you. And that is what's important. listening to people and being involved with people all the time. Never get so high and mighty that there isn't some advice you can be given by somebody else, because everybody I meet knows something I don't know. And some of the wisest people are those that sweep our streets, because they think about things all day when they're pushing the broom around.
Definitely. Oh, thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy, have you kept a diary though? Did you take Tony Benn's advice?
Well, I didn't really take Tony's advice. What I've got down here to my left, you can't see it on the camera just now, is hundreds of notebooks like this. You would have seen me with notebooks all the time.
Yes.
And as I make notes of meetings I do, speech notes and things like that, and I've kept notebooks like this ever since 1964.
Wow.
So I've got an awful lot of them. There's no point in anybody reading them because the writing is so appalling, they'll never be able to
Yes.
decipher it. I do that. So I keep all that kind of stuff. And so, yes, I've got a considerable source material of lots of events. And I've also got notebooks of all the time I was a union organizer as well as an MP, which actually includes the casework, homeless issues, clothing issues for public sector workers, industrial tribunals, all that kind of thing. So it's also a diary of the social issues of the time.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Laura, and all the very best. I look forward to campaigning with you as a candidate because I want to see you elected.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks a lot. Thank you.